Welcome to Profits in Practice, the podcast where medicine meets money. Hosted by myself, Sarah Webb, Managing Director of Webb CFO, and financial strategist for physicians. We break down the numbers, decode the tax code, and help doctors build lasting wealth, one episode at a time. This episode is powered by the Specialty Healthcare Consortium. Dr. O'Connor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to learn from you is I see you speaking in lots of different venues and different spaces. And today I heard a very technical talk that was quite honestly over my head as a CPA, but I did learn something, so that was good. How did you get into that? I mean, how do you have time for that as a practicing physician? But how do you kind of build some of those networks and relationships?
Well, I first got started with it when I first got into private practice.
Okay.
So I didn't really know about the pharmaceutical representatives and how they come to the office and give samples and teach you about things. So I learned about that right when I joined my practice, and I was new to Charlotte at the time. And the reps were like, "Well, if you learn how to do speaking programs, you can learn how to speak and do public speaking, but also meet a lot of the referring doctors in town,"
Yeah.
because I had no idea who anybody was. And so for me, initially, it was sort of a networking opportunity. And I thought maybe I could learn to speak in front of people, with a little bit more poise.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of morphed into really something that I just love. I manage it and I balance it because I think it makes me take better care of my patients. There's so much new information coming at us every day. There's so much research. There's so many new therapeutics, diagnostics, and it's very difficult to keep up with.
Yeah.
Actually, just on a day-to-day basis, we get journals and they stack up on desks and things like that. I guess now they stack up on our phones.
Yeah, they're a download somewhere. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think it helps me keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the allergy immunology space, and I can bring that to my patients. Because a lot of the patients that I see are very complicated and they have seen numerous physicians, and they'll come to me and they'll say, "You're my last resort." We hear that a lot as allergists, immunologists. It's not just
Really?
me. Yes.
Well, is it because they've been, like, pit stopped at several different places? Like,
I think a lot of it has to do with not many people doing immune-based diseases and not a lot of folks out there really knowing when to refer to an
okay,
allergist, immunologist. I think they're more familiar with allergist.
yeah,
than they
they're
are.
allergic to X.
Right.
Yes.
But with immunology and some of the rare diseases, they may not know that, for example, we treat something called hereditary angioedema, random swelling episodes. Who do you send to?
Yeah.
That must be a dermatologist, not necessarily. And so I also feel like it helps me take care of those patients who are complicated, frustrated, just because I know what's new and what's out there, because most patients have tried a lot of things by the time they see an immunologist.
No.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And it also kind of like puts you on the cutting edge of like
Mhm.
of the know of like what's coming next and and also do you feel like with like yes, you know what's coming next, but do you ever give feedback on we need this or have you thought of this or
Absolutely. So, we do clinical research in my practice as well. And so there's investigator initiated studies. And so, yes, after you see enough patients and they're maybe not getting better or not responding as well as you'd like to a drug, you think about maybe other therapeutics or diagnostics that may be helpful. And then and I have done this, and you can come up with your own ideas. And a lot of pharmaceutical industries are very interested in that
okay.
because we are at the front line, right?
Yeah. You're serving the patient.
Mhm.
You're seeing.
The other thing I think about knowing about the new therapeutics is if patients have sort of exhausted what's available, what's FDA approved, we can offer some hope. Like, I know there's studies on this new medication, and hopefully they're going to get FDA approval. I've done that a lot with patients, and offering them a little bit of hope gets them through maybe some pretty dark days when they're suffering from symptoms, right?
Yeah. Well, and your type of patient is also chronic, right? Like
Right.
this isn't just like I broke my arm and it's getting better.
Right.
It's something that they're living with each and every day.
Right. And allergic rhinitis or runny noses in the spring, no joke, patients suffer a lot.
I do suffer too.
And then anything from that to the rare immune deficiency, for example. So absolutely. And I enjoy it. I enjoy interacting with the audiences. I enjoy learning myself. I kind of made a rule later in my career that if I give a talk or a lecture, I also want to learn something.
Okay.
So I also learn.
The little researcher in you,
Yeah.
or I mean,
So
okay.
I'll learn from preparing the talk, but I also like to learn from the audience, right? Because you could always learn something from another healthcare provider. So when I leave, I like to say, okay, what did I learn from this?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I learned a lot today from the talk earlier, so
oh,
it was good.
yeah.
What about advisory boards? So speaking, sometimes you're speaking on like a specific drug, but there's also opportunities, advisory boards, not investigator initiated trials, I understand, but
Mhm.
what is the role of the advisory board with working with the pharmaceuticals?
So advisory boards are usually twofold. There can be a medical advisory board or a commercial
Okay.
advisory board. And so they're different. Commercial often thinking more about how to market a product, how would a marketing campaign best appeal to an allergist, immunologist? What do you think we should say to patients? What do patients need to hear? Because although they're very in tune with what's going on with patients, they're not in front of them day by day. And so the folks that get invited to do ad boards are called KOLs
Okay.
or key opinion leaders. So people who have either done a lot of clinical research or have seen a lot of the types of patients that they're interested in, or have published,
Oh,
obviously as well. And then the medical marketing medical ad boards may be more. Thinking about the clinical research and what steps should we take next, or are there any studies now that you've seen the data to date that we should be exploring? What about this data appeals to you? What doesn't? What should we position, in front of the FDA or in front of patients later when it gets FDA approval? That kind of thing. Or if they've had failed trials,
okay.
should we design a study differently? How would that study look? How do you think that would be successful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a very unique perspective because sometimes I think the commercialization, like, I'm always like, how did they come up with the name of this or,
Mhm.
things like that. But when you talk about the failed studies, it's like, where did that fail, or was there a different endpoint that we should
Mhm.
have been targeting? You
Exactly.
know, I was part of X study and, this endpoint should have really been here and we would
Correct.
have been successful.
Yeah, so then you might not have to throw the whole thing away. And just back to speaking for a moment, obviously doing pharma sponsored speaking for therapeutics or diagnostics is one thing, but also speaking with my own lectures, grand rounds in front of residents, medical students, fellows in allergy, immunology, and mixed audiences as well, family practice,
Yeah.
primary care, to teach them about the diseases that we treat that maybe aren't as familiar to them.
Okay. And that also to me works as a referral network, right?
Correct.
Of them, oh, she knows what she's talking about. Or I've seen a patient that has
Mhm.
XYZ. I need to refer them.
Or I have this patient that I haven't been able to figure out, and now that I've come to this lecture, I think that it could be this,
Yeah.
right? That kind of thing. So,
No. I think that's interesting. I mean, as a patient, I'm always like, I have a very like, this is what doctors do, but interacting with members of the consortium in different phases, I'm like, oh, you're not just a care provider.
mhm.
You're a scientist. You're a speaker. You're like got all these different faucets of things that you're doing.
It keeps it really, really fun and interesting and keeps the passion alive. When you decide to become a doctor when you're young, it's the passion you want to help people. But insurance companies and other challenges
Yeah.
can sometimes make that passion lose its shine a little bit. So I like to do other things to keep myself occupied, passionate, and again, being able to offer the best thing I can for each individual patient.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's the forefront of that.
Yeah.
How do you balance some of the ethical considerations of working with pharma companies? I mean, that's like a push and a pull,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah, so you often will hear people who maybe don't understand it, like, "Oh, you speak for that drug company, so you're in their pocket, or you're gonna prescribe only their drug," and I think that maybe back in the day, those kind of things did happen, right? There's unethical people in every profession. I always keep the patient as my number one priority.
yeah,
So if this drug with this amazing data would work well for patient Mr. Smith, then great, I'll use it. But if not, I'm absolutely not going to, just because I happen to be compensated by the pharmaceutical company for whatever reason. Um, I think that everything I do every day is for the best patient outcome, and I think that helps. I need to also be able to sleep at night.
yeah. Well,
So,
yes, I'm not worried. I think yes, every time we interact with each other, you are always focused on the patient
yeah.
care and like what the best outcome for them is.
Mhm.
Um, I think as a society, right, we've had more transparency with CMS, and like part of me is like, oh, the compliance for all of that. So
Right.
that's got, they're helping balance some of that as well.
No,
Uh,
and I think I like the fact that it's transparent that we are compensated. I think that it makes it much more believable, but it also sort of puts that to the side so we can concentrate on the science, the data, the outcomes, and how whatever it is may or may not help a certain patient type.
yeah. If you were advising a less tenured physician, and they wanted to get involved in speaking, what are some different ways you think that they could interact with companies or associations? What would you recommend?
Well, I definitely think getting involved with your local, regional, and national specialty organizations is a huge way to network, not only with other physicians and healthcare providers, but to meet people who work for pharmaceutical industry. One thing that a lot of doctors do is they don't want to see the drug reps. No drug reps in my office. I'm too busy. And I think that's a mistake. Pharmaceutical reps serve a very important purpose. Not every interaction is perfect. Not every interaction is fruitful, but getting to know them can help because if they find that you are interesting or a good speaker or seem to have a good way about you, then they are the ones that actually recommend you. But I wouldn't get involved thinking it's glamorous or thinking that it's going to shoot you to the top of some ladder. I would really advise to get involved if you're truly passionate about keeping your finger on the pulse, staying at the forefront, and being most concerned about patient outcomes. And you can't be scared to speak in front of people.
Now, what does your prep normally look like?
Well,
One can of Diet Coke? No.
example, 1 or 2 cans that I could. I always review the slides at least a week before, and then typically the day before, sometimes the morning of, if it's an evening program. Review the data as well, not just the slides, because there's a lot that goes into each slide. There's studies that are cited that you need to be very familiar with. Making sure you have the numbers in your head correctly. The notes pages only get you so far,
Sure.
right? And I didn't even know you could look at notes pages while you were presenting until more recently than I'd like to admit, because I memorized everything for years and years. And finally, someone showed me that, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
No wonder everybody up there seems so smart. So,
No, I've seen you present. I think, again, I know I'm not like your target market, right? Like I'm not the person that the slides are designed for, the speech, but I love the patient stories. I love the outcomes. I love the case studies. And as a person who's not even really in depth with the science, I always learn a little bit more. And in my role, right, I really am focused on practice sustainability and the finance piece. Um, I think when we do the best for our patients, all of that kind of falls into line.
exactly.
And it makes your job easier. And from a financial operational standpoint, it's like, okay, if that patient's taken care of, they're not coming back and complaining. Like
Right.
they're getting the best care, but it's also like operationally the best as well.
And as far as practice sustainability, being a speaker, being a consultant, again, having that knowledge of the data, perhaps doing clinical research, helps with practice
Sure.
sustainability because it helps drive referrals. You give good patient
Yeah.
care, the patients then refer. I get referrals from all over the country because people know who I am
Yeah.
and where I work. So it's been a real honor to do this work.
Yeah. I'm a fan of multiple revenue streams. So
I know you are.
I just think I don't even know how far back we have to go, but being a solo practitioner or even a family medicine practitioner, like you're not able to sustain yourself with the current models, and that's not for us to talk about
No,
today or solve. But I think that the multiple revenue streams really protects you as a practice.
it does.
And I didn't even consider the research of you being on the forefront of all of these studies, and yeah, that just fits in nicely with how you're able to serve patients.
Exactly.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank
It's
you for
always fun
inviting me.
talking to you.
Very fun. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Profits in Practice. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow physician. Your financial wellness is just as important as your patient's health, and we're here to help you thrive. Connect with us via our website, webcfo.com, and connect with our guest at sh-consortium.com to find out more about the consortium.